Okay, well, we have the majority of the class here, so I'm sure a few more folks will trickle in along the way, but let's go ahead and get started for this evening. As I told you last week, we're very fortunate to have our librarian, Kelly Janasek, who has agreed to be with us today. She's always very gracious with her time and very generous with her time. And so I always like to invite Kelly to come into the PPA 500 course to give you a tutorial on the library, how to do research in public administration. And I always tell my classes, it's probably be the most useful session you'll have throughout the entire time of the program, because these are skills that Kelly will cover with you that you can use throughout your entire time in the program and all of your future courses. So it's my pleasure to introduce Kelly Janasek, and I will turn it over to you, Kelly, and the floor is yours. Oh, let me make you a co-host, though. I don't think I've done that yet.
Okay. Yeah.
Share. Okay, you should be a co-host. You should be able to share and have all the features.
I see the share. I see the breakout rooms. I'm good. Okay. All the features I need. Good evening, all. I'm Kelly Janasek. I am the policy and law librarian at Long Beach State. I've been there a long, long time. Been a librarian a very, 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 very long time. I have done public policy administration the whole time I've been at Long Beach State, which is more than 30 years. So I think I've got the discipline down a little bit. I was talking to the political science faculty just a couple hours ago, and I was using the class that I taught last night when teaching with you tonight about how it's important for you guys to understand in this information age how it is to find the information you need and understand about it, because it's a new world and it's very interesting. So I'm going to talk about it. Don't be shy about typing in the chat. For the most part, I think I can catch those. Asking me questions, because I may not see the hands. So just go ahead and ask questions. I don't mind being interrupted. I'm a librarian, that's what we do. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to, let me see, share my screen. Here we go. So I just want to go over a couple things. I want to talk about how a quick review of research strategies and steps, and then computer searching tips. And if it doesn't make sense today, when we get to the information that I'm permanently leaving with you, there's a couple videos so you can watch and understand more in depth if it doesn't make sense to you. And I want to make sure that you understand how that works. I'm going to talk about different types of information. In your world, there are types of information that you may have not thought about of using more, even for after you leave Long Beach State, when you're in your career and doing what you need to do. Those are things that'll help you kind of get to the chase and kind of go move quickly, shall we say. I'm going to talk about how to discover information. You no longer search for information. You kind of like to discover it, if that makes sense. So I just want to make sure that you are aware of that. And I'm going to mute a couple of you so we don't have feedback that I'm hearing in my screen, okay? But don't be shy about unmuting and asking questions. I'm going to talk about the basics of APA. If you're not familiar with American Psychological Association, they have created a standard for citing and putting your papers and research together. And your department is elected to follow that. And I want to make sure you understand the basics of that. And then what's going to happen is you're going to be broken into, I think we're only going to do about 2 groups, break you guys up and make you actually see if you can do what I talked about. Make you try to put you in an escape room and see if you can get out, see if you understand the process. And we do it as a group because then you can talk to each other and kind of figure out how it works. Are there questions about what I'm going to cover? Are we ready? I see a couple yeses. I know there's some people I don't see everybody for, but that's okay. Here we go. Sometimes you need to do some pre-work in doing your research. One of the things that people kind of don't think about is how to look at their topic and determine their topic. One is to evaluate the size of your topic. I can't tell you how many times I have a person who comes and says, I have to write a paper about 5 to 10 pages on abortion. Well, I hate to say it, but I have 10,000 or more books just on that topic. So you need to kind of evaluate and break it down and determine what the emphasis is going to be, maybe what a subtopic under it might be. I've had people who want to do things that are so small, there isn't even enough for a 5-page paper, which makes it interesting. We have to think about how you can expand your topic maybe to do what you need to do. And you need to think about your topic across the disciplines. Maybe you want to do abortion from a sociology point of view, how people are dealing with the issues, they're coming from the politics of it. Maybe you want to deal with it from a health perspective or a psychological perspective or a medical perspective. A lot of topics have more than one area. So I'm going to show you the sources, the majority of the sources that you will use for public policy administration, but it doesn't mean that maybe that's where you need to be when you think about your topic. You may want to subdivide it out to political science or sociology, or I'll tell you one, recreation and leisure studies. That's one of my departments, because one of the questions I have tonight is how to deal with parks. Well, they study that. So there might be stuff there that you never thought about that won't show up in the journals or articles that do public administration, but they talk about in recreation and leisure studies, the policies that they need to help make so there can be parks out there for the people to use. So sometimes crossing disciplines may make a difference, and then you need to develop your vocabulary. Because what you're typing into the computer, it's not smart enough to know that parks could also be considered green spaces. In the rec area, they talk about green spaces. They don't talk about parks. They just talk about green spaces. So it's one of those things that the language changes, and so the words change. And so being able to find that information sometimes helps to actually develop your vocabulary. And I'm going to talk about some tricks with that when I show you, demonstrate that, ways to find and help you determine your size. Is it too big, too small? Where else it might be, and how to work with your vocabulary. Those are the pre-research steps that I wanted to mention real quick. I hope that makes sense. Now I'm going to talk about the computer searching tips. To refine your topic, the computers that we use with the databases that we purchase, that you'll find that all librarians really want to sell you this because you guys help pay for about a $5 million budget in databases, over 334 of them. And these are not Google. These are way better than Google searching, even better than Google Scholar searching. So they work differently. They're not like Siri or Alexis where I can say, I want all the articles that talk about environmental policy and climate change. They don't work that way. You need to take out your keywords, your vocabulary, and then put it in computer language and it together. So I want environmental policy and climate change. Those are two distinct topics, but I want them to be linked. I want environmental policy, but I do not want climate change. So everything that talks about environmental policy, but talks about climate change will be dropped out. Does that make sense? The advantage of and why we pay the big bucks for these databases are their filters. They're refined areas. They call them different things. They're always on the left-hand side. Google search has that. They give you an option of dates. This week, last week, 3 years, 2 years. That's all they give you. I have some that get down that have, I think ABI Inform has 20 choices. You can refine a whole lot of stuff. You can refine by geography, location. You can refine by company name. You can refine by, sometimes they allow you to refine by age. There's variation depending on the database, because what happens is someone looks at that article and gives it all these filter specialties. So when you go to put in your search information, and refine it, you will get that article. That's not what Google does, and that's not what Google Scholar can do. The other thing I want to remind you is the word or. So if you're talking about parks or green space, it will look for both sets of words. Or is a way to put all those synonyms or different words that might mean the same thing together and make sure it's found. Then there's phrase searching, which does work in Google, and I highly, highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite features. Environmental policy, if you type it into the computer or Google, it will look for all the articles that have environmental and all the articles that have policy in them, and then all the articles that have environmental policy in them. So you can imagine you get a lot of junk. But if you do quote, environmental policy, unquote, you will get the articles that literally say environmental policy, that phrase. Does that make sense? And I'll give an example of it because I want to show you from Google, Google Scholar, the databases. And I'll use that one because there's so much stuff on environmental policy. And if you guys didn't know, environmental policy is not necessarily a climate change term. In business, environmental policy is how they look at the business and then the environment they're in and what they're doing. So to even confuse you more, there's more stuff that use that term, but not in the same meaning. That's the problem with the English language. Another thing that they allow you to refine is by subject terms. I probably won't be able to find it. I had a great example a couple years ago in one database, and we looked for environmental policy in quotes. And we found a lot, a couple 100,000. So we refined it by subject terms, environmental policy. And we found that article that talked about climate change and how this is a policy that needs to be addressed, but nowhere does it say environmental policy or use those words. But it's a policy about climate change, which means it's environmental policy. So someone looked at it and determined it needed those subject headings to be able to find that. So quite often I will limit to subject terms because I will find better stuff. Or I'll find stuff that didn't use the words that I typed in because it's about that. Does that make sense? Okay. Then you got to get the document type that works best. And that's where I'm going next. So types of information. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Anybody? I know. People don't like to ask questions anymore, I've decided. You can put it in chat. No questions there either. Okay. I know I'm that good, so okay. Let's talk about the different types of information that exist out there. And I talk about them because sometimes if you know what you need, you know which type of information is more apt to have the best find of what you're looking for. And by doing that, you then know where to start in the process. And the majority of the information that you will probably look for in PPA and professionally are articles. But within articles, there's different types of articles. And I want to talk about the different types of articles. So on the bottom picture, as you can see, we've got the Mirror, the Daily Sun, the Daily Telegraph. Those are what they call rags, or I know you know what I'm talking about. As you leave the grocery store, they're there by the candy. I think this week Prince Albert's all over them because the kings were all upset with the man and all this stuff. Brad and Jolene quite often always made a cover. I can't even imagine how many covers they've been on. They are great. Libraries collect them for popular culture. They're not really indexed anywhere. And truthfully, if you're using them for your research, I'd really like to know what kind of research you're doing. It'd be interesting to see. I have a colleague who did use them. She wrote a book on skinheads. And of course, they showed up in what they call the rags a lot. It's a typical type of thing that happened in Britain. So it was very popular, and she found a lot of stuff on them. The next kind of information you may find that may or may not help you are news items. I have the little newspapers there. They aren't in paper pretty much anymore. They're all online. News services, news wires, they come in lots of different ways. But it's a way to get what's going on. It's a way to track what happened at the event. It's a way to find out what thoughts are going on, editorial kind of information. So how people are feeling about things. And there's different kinds of newspapers. People are familiar with those that are published LA Times, Orange County Register, the majors, but there's also a lot of what we call alternative press or small city newspapers. And we have access to all that stuff. I can't tell you how many databases that do nothing but talk about news. There's a lot of it out there. So yes, we can find you news. The next one has got the little piggy bank on it with a little piggy, and then the PA Times. The Journal of the AMA, or American Water Works Association. The PA Times, or the American Public Administration Association professional journal, professional trade publication. These are a lot of associations that help people that are in that profession publish something for themselves. I have American Libraries, the Journal of the American Library Association. I have College and Research News, the American Association of College and Research Libraries. It's published for me, it's published for people, and they quite often are not always scholarly articles, but they're what I call applied articles. They may tell you how this will work. We failed at this and why. There's a lot in city government organizations that have those kind of publications. They're a way to, in your profession, you may find these more helpful, these kind of articles. And we have a database that actually indexes these. And you can limit to trade professional publications. So you can get the how we did it, how we failed, all that kind of stuff. The one that's on the top, the Public Policy and Administration, the one in blue, if you can tell, the APPA, that is a scholarly peer-reviewed journal. That is the cream of the crop, the A+ journal. This is research-oriented. They may have commentary, they may talk a little bit about what's going on in the profession, but their purpose is to publish scholarly, research-oriented materials. So this is a time where I use the word or. Sometimes they're referred to as scholarly or peer-reviewed. Does everybody understand that topic? They're kind of like your professor's going to peer review your papers. But these articles that end up here probably have at least 2, if not 3, blind peer reviews about the quality of the article. Did the methodology make sense? Did the findings make sense? Is the data legitimate? Are the references or sources they use to get where they're at make sense? They are so, I won't lie to you, snobby for being peer reviewed, that there was somebody in the sciences who made it through the peer review process, made it through the blind peer review process, but someone later called the publisher of the journal and said, we cannot replicate this methodology this person did in their study. Can you ask what happened? The journal went back, the editorial board of the journal went back to the author and kind of found out that the author had falsified the information. It was not true. Well, that journal said, no, you're not acceptable for our journal. So they literally removed that article out of their journal. And if you had it in paper, you have it, but online, it doesn't exist anymore. They even took it a step further. If anybody published in their journal and cited that previous article, they removed that article too because it was bad research. So when I say they're snobby, they mean they really, really think it's important to be peer reviewed and be quality research. Does this make sense about these different types of articles? Probably the top two you'll use the most, the scholar peer reviewed or the professional trade ones. But I just wanted you to know that there are different things out there. Okay. Oh, I have a chat. Woohoo! Thank you. I'm glad it makes sense. Never thought about articles that way, did you? Yeah, in my world, it's something different. I didn't even talk about biased, like news has biased, and I know you know what I'm talking about. There are right wing, left wing, and something in the middle. There's alternative press, all that kind of thing. A lot of these publications all have bias. So I have an index that talks about journals and their biases. That tells you how major it is. Okay, that's one type of information. Let's talk about books or reports. I know you're familiar with a book. The Promise and Pitfall of Performance-Informed Management is one. The Sage Handbook of Public Administration is an encyclopedia. It's interesting. It was the editor's B. Guy Peters. And somehow last night I found an article that he had written. I said, oh, I know him. I don't know him, but I know his work, okay? America's Divided Recovery is a report found off the internet. And that's what I mean by reports, okay? Anybody and everybody will publish on the internet. You are now the editorial insight. It's not like a peer-reviewed journal or a trade that went through some editorial article or a news who went through an editor. You now have to do this. Now, there's not to say there aren't scholarly books, and they do have what I call DOIs. I'm going to talk about those in a little bit. That's a way to identify those that are scholarly peer-reviewed when it has a DOI on it. They're good for history or background. I like to talk about like the Sage Handbook of Public Administration. That is a nice packaged encyclopedia about your discipline, and it talks about the major topics and then talks about the subtopics in it. So if you have to write your paper and you're not sure where to go with it, this is a good place to start, to read like 4 or 5 pages about the topic, figure out its nuances and see if there's something as a subtopic in it. It even has references at the end of the chapter to get you started with articles. So you haven't even looked at an index, you've looked inside a book and found the references and know where to start, okay? The government is the biggest publisher in this country. We are a federal depository at Long Beach. We're also a state of California depository. They're no longer publishing in paper. They're pretty much all online. The problem is you can no longer trust .edu, .gov, .com because they cross and intermingle. They're trying to hide. If you guys didn't know this, the internet, World Wide Web is created to sell you stuff. That was the whole purpose of it. Just along the way, we figured out we could also publish stuff on it and didn't have to pay for paper anymore. So it's interesting. You will use books, but probably not as much as you think you will. You probably more have to use a report kind of thing. And I'll show you some ways to find that kind of material, okay? Just in case you need it. Questions about books or report type of material? Okay. People are still a source of information. I'm a person. I'm giving you information, am I not? Okay. They're probably the best for the most current information. My best example is, say you are working with a city and they have a citizens advisory meeting last night and you couldn't go, and you know one of your colleagues did. First thing this morning, I'm going to run right in there and have them give me the breakdown of how that meeting went and what was talked about. A lot of think tanks, associations, organizations have a page within their about that talks about who their key contact people are about particular things that they talk about. So you now have emails. You're now seeing at the end of articles or somewhere on an article, the email address of the author. You'll see them in book chapters. That kind of information is coming out more and more. They're still a little harder to find. I don't have a directory of the world of people. You might find them. I have search engines that'll search social medias, various kinds, if you want to find somebody or find something. And I think you guys know kind of how to do this. Usually it's kind of maybe more verbal, but APA shows you how to cite all those various kinds of media things. They show you how to search something if you saw it off Facebook, if you saw it off TikTok, if you saw it off, I can't remember them all. Okay. So yes, they are a source of information. Probably not your most common, but don't forget, somebody's going to eventually write that article, write that book, publish something. So people are an important piece of information. I love my children's cover, my children's book. That is a book. Yes. Okay. The other final one that I want to talk about is statistics. And it comes with a way to explain data. And a lot of the scholarly peer-reviewed articles will have some kind of data, statistical is the norm, in there. Sometimes it's graphical, like on the top of the page, or sometimes it's numerical, like on the bottom of the page. The biggest published statistics in our country, the longest term one, and somebody argued with me last night. I'm going to have to check that. Does anybody know the longest running statistic kept in the United States by the US government? You can type it in chat. Call it out. Yes, it is the census. Da, 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 da. It's mandated by federal law since about 1780 that we keep track of how many people for representation. So it's done every 10 years. That's why we had it in 2020. But if you didn't know, the Department of Census also has census of transportation, census of business, census of industry, census of manufacturing, census of, they got 10 or 12 of them. So it's great to have that data. The problem with it, every 10 years in our country, that's, I mean, a city can grow 1,000, 10,000 people in, a month. So they now have changed this. For law, they do the count every 10 years, but the census is also maintaining other ways to keep track of demographics in the country. And they're doing that every year, actually, the American Community Survey. So if you want to keep track of data, that kind of thing, it's a way. Another long-term series, as someone pointed out, is the weather data, temperatures, that kind of stuff. I got to find out which is longer, the census or them. But I'm thinking I saw weather data in England in 1800, so it's probably the longest running thing. There are lots of time series that are put out there, and we even have, I'll even show you a guide to help you figure out if there's statistics that will help support a project. So if you're writing a paper, having a statistic to help support that data is a good way to go. And like I said, a lot of the peer-reviewed or scholarly articles will include some kind of data. I'm going to take a minute and stop sharing to look at all your boxes and see if anybody has any questions about different types of information. No? Okay. Light up my face a little bit. If you didn't know, the building behind me is our library at Long Beach State. That's the front door. Move there. See the front door? The tables are still there, but not as many. They now have lockers on the right side that if you want to borrow a book and you can't get in when we're open, it can be placed in a locker and you can pick it up at any time when you run by campus, you can get it. So that is the front door of the library. It is 6 stories. We have books on 3. We have all sorts of stuff in there. And if you haven't been by, Saturdays, we're open Saturday and Sunday. Good time to come is Saturday, actually. Not that many people come to visit us on Saturday. Okay, let me go back to sharing my screen. Good question. Good question. Let me do that one right while I'm talking about it. Yes, I have a whole index that talks about whether that journal is peer-reviewed or not. There are certain factors that exist out there. There's one been around since 1950. The man made a lot of money in California tracking citations to see which the most quality publications there are in the various disciplines. And we have that database still today. I remember when we used to have it in paper, it took up walls and walls and walls in space. So there are metrics that are used to determine the quality of the journal. Now, the journal itself will tell if it's a typical scholarly publication, what percentage of the things they receive that they actually publish. That's probably their biggest indicator. But the one that comes along with all these metrics, the three that come to mind, is they track the citations themselves from that journal. So if this article came out in 2018 and it's cited by other authors in 2019 and a whole bunch more in 2020 and a lot more in 2021, it will probably get a higher rating because the article is set something research, a track of research that people are using. So yes, there are metrics to follow it. And I will remember, let me get my piece of paper to show you how to find journal metrics. Is there a good one or be all one? No, because it depends on what you're looking at, depends on what the metric is you want it to track. There are a lot of, these journals are kind of based on how they're publishing history. And there's a lot of evolving interdisciplinary new concepts coming out that don't fit those journals. So there are a lot of non-traditional publications being done that are being published in what they call open access journals, OA. And there is now rankings of green, gold, yellow, and junk open access. Okay. So they haven't been around long enough to be able to get these metrics because they don't consider it a viable metric unless they have 5 years of data on the journal. So you can imagine the new stuff, which doesn't, so it may not last 2 or 3 years, but maybe cutting edge publications, scholarly research, because it's so unique and different and no one else has published anything on it. So there's kind of a big bias in this. And there's also a diversity equity issue in this. It seems like once a person is published and has an article that's cited several times, and if they publish enough, they tend to get cited more and more and more, where the majority of people never get cited again. It is kind of a, it's interesting. There's problems with it. But there are ways to track it, and depending on what you want to be the quality, we can help you find that at the library. Thank you for asking. I forget that that's something we want. I don't think I have it on your public administration page anymore, but there were a couple articles that talked about what would be considered the top tier journals in your profession for scholarly peer reviewed. And if anybody's interested, I can dig that article out and share it with you if you want the best of. But remember, you got trade and professional journals that won't make that list, and they may have the kind of articles you really need for your research. I don't always, unless you're trying to get a job in academia and keep your job for tenure and promotion, where you have to publish in peer-reviewed journals of quality, to me, it's not that big of a deal. The fact that I have an index that's indexing that journal has recognized the fact that that journal has some validity to the discipline. Does that help you understand? Yes, no? I know it's one of those things that's kind of weird. But if you want to talk about it, I'd be glad to talk all sorts of stuff about it. Yeah. It's the date. I have a librarian who's so data driven. He really believes in it. Me, not so much. And we can argue all day and night about it and show both points of view. Okay. Let me go talk about how to start to discover information. I don't know if you see that web address. Notice it's CSULB and it's a .com. It's not .edu. It's not on the university server. So csulb.libguides.com/public_administration. That is a guide, a research guide to help you find the best that will help you for anything in public administration. Now, last night's class, somebody threw me stuff. Well, I'm doing stuff on transportation. Well, I've got a guide for transportation. Doesn't cover the same stuff. Someone said I'm in the EDD program. Well, there's a guide for that. It's not necessarily covered by this. We have 334 databases, not including Google Scholar, not counting all the other stuff that exists out there. So yes, we have about 110 research guides for each discipline on our campus, each major and subdiscipline. So, it helps you find stuff. You're discovering what's out there. So let me do this because I want to show. And I got to figure out where I put it. Excuse me. I stayed up too late. Okay, ignore my email for a minute. Okay. This is the university webpage. You can go directly by typing in that address, but I want to make sure you understand what's here. One of the things it talks about are workshops that we have. And I didn't mention this last night. Nursing workshop. Oh, there's no more left over. There might be another workshop later on by citation management. He has no more left, it looks like, this semester. So there's ways of finding out the other things that you might need. That was under, back there, services, workshops. This is your library account. Okay. How to has a whole lot of stuff. So if you need to, in the library, how to check out, see reserve, access, I'm going to have some of this stuff on the webpage for you. If you want a particular book, these things are all there. I've made them easier by putting them on the guide. So if you have never looked at OneSearch, which is our version of Google, so this is where you're going to find your books and reports. It's actually weeded out of the web publishing to those that are considered more, I wouldn't say scholarly is the correct word, but more academically inclined than just somebody's sales pitch. Okay. So one thing I want to show you, because I'm talking to you guys, all do these Google searches. I love to show environmental policy because it's one of those that's got environmental, which has those word is incorrectly used other places, and it's policy, and doggone it. Whoa, it went up since yesterday. Because yesterday it was 1.999. Today it's 2.220 billion hits on using the words environmental and the word policy somewhere together. Now, yes, that looks like I want, that looks like I want. Do you guys remember my conversation about using the quotations? I want it literally to say environmental policy and not just whatever. Get 57.9. That's about what I had last night. But are you guys going to look at 57 million things for the good stuff? What about if I went into I'm going to do both of them. This gets me 5.5 million. See how well there. This gets me 1.4 million. That's a big difference. Okay. Now they actually put the phrase in and look at what limits you've got. Dates, maybe a review article, patent. That's not very good. So let me talk about our version of Google, and I'll just go right to the hit. Type it correct, yeah. That's really small, isn't it? $221,000 versus 2.2 million. We're getting smaller, and look what our options are over here. I keep hitting my little hand and putting it up for some reason. Put my hand down, hand down, hand down. I'm not sure how to put my hand down from here. I don't know. I'll have to figure it out. Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, it went to that book. Okay. Ah, I didn't. I just did. Oh, I'm so mad when I closed my windows down incorrectly. There's the library. Of course, I've got it number 1. It's the end of the day. I can tell I can no longer type. My fingers hurt. Okay. And I still have the same results. If I let's go back into Google, I might get different results. They change the results every hour, I swear. But look what I have on my left-hand side. I'm trying to bring my thing down. I can pick just articles. I can pick reports. I can pick books. I can do book chapters. I can do newspapers. I could do web sources. I could do conference proceedings, which is the gray literature. I could do data sets. I could do DVDs, images, CD-ROMs, maps, audio. I can now limit to the type of material I want. I can do it by date. I dumped a lot of stuff just by doing the last 10 years. I can do, no. Come back. I can limit it to subject. Do I mean environmental policy where the book report has been determined that's what it's about? Maybe I want climate change, I want environmental sciences. I'm quickly down to 57,000 instead of 221,000. That's a big difference in limiting myself. And it helps me know what's out there and what to work from and whatever. I will tell you right now, if you only want full text, it may not be the best thing to do to click that and limit to it. Whether it's a database searching full text, because if you find something you like, odds are we can get it for you if we don't have it full text within 48 hours at no charge. Think about how many times you've been on Google and they say, oh, $45, please. No, we'll get it for you. So don't limit. I talked about open access kind of publications. Available in the library means it's actually a physical being book. I can limit by languages. Ooh, I don't read Turkish. I don't read, let's just do the English, and I dropped off a couple hundred, well, 1,000 at least. So as you can see, the filters help. Now, let's say I want to go back and I want to look at these reports. Majority of reports probably here are probably by the federal government. I won't lie to you because we are a depository. And I can see that. The Federal Register. Let's take out reports. And let's get it. I have a hard time keeping track of my scrollers here. Let's see what web resources are. Oh, this is some good stuff. Here's a blog. Here's something out of Florida politics. Here's some more blogs. Newspaper. Okay, here's an open access publication. Do you start to see why this is probably a little easier to use than Google? So that gets you your books. That gets you reports. It will get you articles, but it's the filters, there just aren't enough filters there. So having said that, where's my mouse? Oh, come on. I'm going to get sources, and here are to find articles by databases. So depending on what you're looking for, specifically public administration, maybe you're looking for policy, maybe you're looking for current issues. These are some of the databases that'll help you. Now, 4 databases out of 334 is a big difference, isn't it? Okay. If the little I is there and the lock is there, that means it's something we purchased for you guys. The I explains what it does. So public administration abstracts literally does public administration journals. So if I was in Google Scholar and I looked something up, I will not get all the journal articles that could be indexed in public administration abstracts. And let me tell you the difference. Google Scholar is self-promoting. People put it in there because they cited an article or they were cited. Public administration and all these databases work differently. They pick the journals that they feel are important to the discipline, then they index every single article from page 1 to the end of the issue every single time. Does that make sense? They index every article. So you will get stuff that you will not get in Google Scholar. And it may be the stuff you need. The next one I talk about is politics database. Political sciences is emphasis, but it also has 2 sub indexes in it. One is Public Affairs Information Service. You don't need to know that. You'll just be able to see it. It'll search for you, which looks at local and state publications by their governments. It does a lot of publications that are more related to public affairs. It also has a subset of a policy index. So if you're looking for policies, it should be over there on my public policy side. It is. It's the first one listed. It indexes policies. My ABI Inform, the 2 I'm going to show you is the Public Administration Abstracts and the ABI Inform tonight. ABI Inform is it's been around since the 60s. It stands for American Business Index. It really is a business index, but you can limit it to nonprofit or public sector and take out all the corporation stuff. And this is the one that indexes all the trade and professional journals. So I want you to be aware of that one. It's a really good one for that kind of information. The last one that I'm mentioning is Social Index. If you're dealing with people, there's probably an article about something that relates to people in Social Index. It's sociology, but it's more than that. It's social sciences. Anything that deals with people show up in there. So let me show you. Let me first ask if anybody has any questions. No? Okay. Okay. Public administration abstracts. If you've opened up your single sign-on, which I did over here, see, there's my apps. I got it going. And once you log in, you don't have to log in again. Just leave it open. Great, because if you go back and forth between here and there whenever, what's it telling me? Data storage. I don't care about data storage. What's going on? I accept my data storage. Because of the European Union, American companies now have to watch what they say they're storing. Okay. We talked about and or not. There it is. Let's do environment. Get environmental impact too. Environmental. And policy. 2,230. Let's do environmental policy. The phrase $830. Do you start to see a difference here? That phrase searching is the best thing. So I got refined. You guys are not going to look at 830. I'm not going to look at 830. There's 10 per page. Most people don't go past the first page. I'm sorry. They at least need to go to page 2. Look at the first 20 hits to see if there's anything there. What it starts to give you is some interesting information. You can limit it. I only want the scholarly peer-reviewed journals. I got 677. I don't want it that far back. I only want it back to 2012. I want 10 years. I'm down to 71. Remember when we started with 22 billion hits in Google? What a difference. I probably will narrow it down some more. 71 is still a lot. I can narrow it down by subject. See, I have a question. Definitely better, yeah. 48 actually use the subject heading environmental policy, so I know they're about that. 7 use the subject heading public administration with them. 48 is 3 screens to look at. That first one kept showing up because it's probably one of the most current ones out there. I'm going to show you this one for a reason. So when you hit the references, you've got a couple things. It tells you the title, the authors, the name of the journal it's in, the subject headings they used. Now, this one interestingly uses the term literature. So they did a literature search, which might give you references if it's what you're looking for. They give you an idea what the article's about. They give you credit information. They give you a DOI. Let me take a minute and talk about DOIs. DOIs, digital object identifiers, created by APA. They have become the standard to know that you're looking at a scholarly peer-reviewed source, whether it be a book or a book chapter or an article. If it has a DOI, when you cite it, you need to include that DOI. And I'm going to talk about how the citation may come out versus what you may have to edit to actually have it in your bibliography. And I'll even take it further. Dr. Powell now can search by a DOI to actually see that reference and article. So it works both ways now. So they become very, very important in our lives. I know you guys can't get excited about it, but it at least tells you you've got a scholarly article. Does that make sense? Okay, I'll share again. So I decide I like this article. What I'm going to do, I don't have the article. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to get it at CSULB. Do you see that button on the left-hand side? Click on it. It gives you a couple different options here. I need Okay. It tells me that the 2018 copy of this journal is not available because I don't see that year here. So this is actually a bad reference. Because I can't get it because we stopped taking it in 2003, I can sign in for more options. Oh, why do I always find the one that doesn't work right in the middle of class? Always, 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 always. Let me pick another one so I can show you how this works, and I will to myself. Yeah, get it fixed. Let me go back one more here. Yeah, came in my email. I heard it. That one's full text. It's already there. Let's try this one. Get it. I want the article. Well, I can go look for it on Google Scholar, whatever, but I've gotten easier if this is working. It is. I want to get a digital copy of that article in 24 hours. 48, if it takes longer, they let you know. All I have to do is click on get it. It'll send the full text article to me at home in my email. I don't have to come to the library. I don't care. And I didn't have to pay for it. Note that if you want your citation, it's here. But I find that the APA here in this thing is not always good, although that one's a good one, kind of. It needs to be edited. I would recommend instead that if you like it, go ahead and email it to yourself here like I did. But over here, when you email it to yourself, you can change the citation format to APA. And we're going to talk about no matter what version you use, you will have to edit them. But now you can cut and paste and your bibliography is going together. And as you gather up your citations, you're starting to think about what articles may or may not work, that kind of thing. Now you can save them to a disk. You can create a sign-in and save them to a folder, but you cannot save them in a folder and leave here without signing in because it disappears. Because we have access, this database is accessed by all the CSUs. So you can imagine that's 244, I can't even tell you how many thousand students and faculty and stuff. So you need to make sure if you want an account and want to keep track of references, you can do that. I just say email each one and then start foldering them, okay? Does this make sense? Okay. Yes, I like a little interaction here. If you wanted just to search, I don't know. I got 164 just on parks and green space. I can work my way through the system. No, I still have my dates in there. You might want to, take some of them off. I don't want the scholar peer reviewed anymore. Most of the journals in this one are scholarly repeat. Yeah, it didn't change. My date limiter should change it. Yeah, I got a lot more. 10 years is better. Okay. So there's ways to have the database manipulate. This is probably one of the smallest ones. I believe it only indexes about 100 journals. It is the smallest one. Meanwhile, politics database and ABI Inform and social index, the biggest one is ABI Inform. It indexes close to 10,000 things. Politics database, I think, is around 7,000 things. But I want to show you the difference. These are the different vendors for what we have. So don't ever come to a library and say, I need to get something out of ProQuest, because we'll look at you funny. Okay, ProQuest which? We have 70 databases from ProQuest. What you want to remember is the name of the database itself, please. This is the one that allows you to find trade publications. So I can, look for it in the subject maybe, or the title. The other thing it allows you to do is, since it's business oriented, and I'm just going to cut to the chase, I can look at my classification codes, and by organizational types, I can limit to the public sector. Maybe I want the public sector and the nonprofit sector. I know I don't want multinational or corporations or small businesses or diversified companies, okay? So I sometimes will do that to focus it a little bit more on the non-corporation kind of thing. I got 1,067, and there are my trade journals. Of them, half of them are trade articles. And I can change my dates. I'm down to 103, okay? So Electronic Perspectives is from the electric people out of Washington, D.C. Planning's from the American Planning Association out of Chicago. I got Inside EPA, okay? A lot of these are full text, and they are mostly, because they're kind of news things, some of them are. They are full text, but it's HTML. Sorry, that's what you get. They do have some full text that's real if it's a PDF-based kind of report. But that's the kind of thing you can get besides the scholarly peer-reviewed stuff also, or regular publications. Ooh, they don't have 100%. So guess what? You can get it. Get it, get it, get it. I want it. I want this Alaska publication. Trying to find, you guys are making me see if there's a, see, that's what I'm worried about. How many of these are no longer supporting single sign-on? That's what I need to have. Yeah, I needed to know about. Okay, so you know what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out if there's a problem. There's a problem. There's a technical problem. Okay. Are there questions about that? How that works? Okay. Again, you can do the same thing as I did the other one. I can, email. I can say I want it in citation. I want it. You want to make sure you say APA 7th edition. Yes, APA's been around. You want the 7th edition. Your email, your name, a subject, whatever. Okay. So you can start to gather your information. And there it is. Policy update. Clean power plan. Ooh, interesting. Okay. This database even goes and gives you suggested sources. So somebody who looked at this article looked at some of these other articles. So sometimes you find other information that you may not have thought about, which may lead you a different way. A lot of this is on regulatory information, and you got links to the source right there because it's in their database. Remember, this one indexes a lot of stuff, so you get a lot of more information. Are we good on that kind of sourcing by articles? Can't see you anymore. There we are. Stop sharing. See if anybody's got any questions. A hand raise, please. Go.
Hey, Miss Kelly, how you doing? I just had a question, not about journals, but textbooks. I think the university might have a couple available, I think, right? How could we access those textbooks for, courses like in this class, for instance? Do we have that accessibility or not?
I am getting ready to show you how to find books. I will tell
Oh.
you right now, we do not buy all the textbooks. If
Okay.
we came and forward the few books. My total budget for my 7 departments was $7,000 to buy books. A typical book is $195. You can tell what little I bought. So we do not even try to buy textbooks. That doesn't mean that the professor may have put something on reserve, and I can show that to you. I will write that down, reserve. Okay, so yes and no. Now, in the state of California, we have affordable learning solutions law. So our bookstore is a nonprofit, and they have rentable textbooks who are cheaper than purchasing straight out. So you might get on their website and see if we look and I don't have it. Okay. Somebody else had a question. Did I see that? Nancy, or is that just a yes?
No, it was just a yes, because I think you said if we understood it, so I just put
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. I do. I'm a verbal. This internet stuff is hard for me because I get, somebody's sitting across the desk from me and they're asking me questions. They're trying to tell me what they need. I can interpret what they need just by the look on their face. That's the kind of work I do. I'm an intuitive kind of a person. If I can't see it, I can't answer it. Okay. Let me go back and talk about books and reports. So on this get sources, the next thing down that I list out is right here. I kept saying that SAGE Handbook of Public Administration. This is an encyclopedia. This is an encyclopedia. This is an encyclopedia. They are online. So what this allows you to do if you have a topic and you're not sure where to take it or what to write from it or whatever, and it better be there. Yes, it is. You can use these books to define your topic, to get your terminology, vocabulary, to understand the topic. This one is arranged by major topics like that. You see, I can do a subject index at the end, and I think we looked up environment. They didn't have very good choices because it's a public administration. So you're doing administrative history, say. So let's go ahead and kind of see what we've got here. Talks about it, breaks it down. My favorite piece, the very, 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 very end, don't get dizzy watching this, are the references it includes. So back in 1980, this was considered the article that talked about this. It gives you kind of a starting place of sources. Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but if I want to cite this, come down. APA, it is a quality scholarly thing because it has a DOI for this chapter. Okay, so you will start to see this kind of thing. You can download the PDF, link it, whatever. Okay, so these encyclopedias are a way to understand your topics a little better, get your vocabulary, get your words. Do I have one? I do not. So at this point, let me just go back to another screen and show you. I got something a little popping up here. If you want to know what is on reserve under services, how to reserve. Well, I want to search reserves, and I want PPA 500. Oh, there isn't anything here. You'll have to talk to professor, see if he'll put a copy on reserve. Or if you have an actual name of a book, other than looking in reserves, look under anything. You have an actual name. You probably have a textbook name. I don't have a textbook name with me. I have the 2011 edition of this textbook. Okay. There's the 2016 edition, the 2020. So sometimes just looking under the name, I don't know if that's the author or whatever, but at least get you an article that might get you. Find those textbooks. It's Politics of Administrative Processes. Let's see if there is a copy in the library. I may have an older copy. I don't know that I have a current one. And again, put it in quotes, it does help. Politics of Administrative Processes. What do you know? 2021. We don't have it in-house, but Dominguez Hills has it available, and whoever gets there first and can order it, we'll get it from Dominguez Hills for you. You can check it out for 2 months. Renew it. We'll return it for you. You can always sign in for more options and see if you can borrow it from somebody else. Okay, February 1st. I hate being on the 1st. The 1st, all this stuff happens on the 1st. Technology breakdowns. So if the one gets checked out, the 20, if you're using the current edition of it, okay, you can check it, see if we get a copy from somebody else. They can get chapters for you. It looks like I have the 1996 edition in-house, which may be a little too old. This has been published a lot. See, the other problem with textbooks, they publish a new edition every year, and it's just hard to keep up. Okay. Any questions about that? So that gets me sources. If you need statistics and data set, there's a whole guide just on that kind of data. It's here. The thing I want to mention here are some of the other tabs that are on this guide. Like I said, last night, somebody asked me some questions and I thought, oh, I can get that for them. If you guys ask me questions and need sources and it's not real obvious, like someone last night, they wanted transportation from the U.S. Department of Transportation. I can put together something in 2 minutes, okay? Stuff on nonprofits, stuff on city counties, budgeting. Oh, I love this book. The Failure of Governance in Bell, California. Big time corruption in a small town. Yep. Budgeting and taxes. Those are topics that have come up. So I'll put together a little topics thing to give you sources right away. What these are organizations that are creditable. They published in paper, now they publish online, and I'm just giving you who they are because you probably don't know who they are, unlike me, who knows who I have to go look at to see if they're publishing anything I might need for you guys to purchase for you guys. I talked earlier about the research steps and the search tips. These are little videos I did at the beginning of COVID 2020. They're about 8 minutes long, but they go in depth and show you how to do it. And I don't even look like that anymore. So we don't. I even have a pop quiz if you want to see if you understand what's in there. If you're taking the policy class and you need to find policies, here's what's recommended. I even have some sites of policies of interest, books. I have directories of places. Most of these are put together by librarians. A list of organizations that tend to influence or write policy for governments and or the like. And you can go in by topic. Say you want gun control, you can go in and look and see what kind of organizations might be writing policy about gun control. And then you can look them up and see what they're trying to advocate for. If you're doing the research design and instruments course where you have to put together a study, we have stuff for you. We have data sets. We have books on how to do that. Okay. And some even database stuff. If you're doing the program evaluation class, where you have a program and you have to evaluate it, I even give you cheat ways to work in Google to see if you can't get some ways of finding some program evaluations. Again, books. That's kind of that area to give you an idea what's there. Do you think you can answer some questions about what we just talked about? It's quiz time. Woohoo! Quiz time. So did that. Okay, open up your chat. The best type of article to use for research is gossip, news, peer-reviewed, trade professional. Yep, peer-reviewed. That's considered the A+. Boy, once you learn that A+ thing, you guys get it. Other question. Web pages and reports from the web need editorial oversight to confirm credible sources of information. I would validate it via Ask a Person, Author Credentials, Wikipedia. I alluded to it, but didn't say it outright. So let's see if you can kind of come up with it. Author credentials, that is probably the best way. I talked again, how if an author can't support his research, they're going to kick him out of the journal. So yes, a credential of the web page, the report do make a difference. If you have a report and you look it up and you're like, who in the heck are these people? And you try to find them on the web and you can't figure out who these people are, talk to your librarian. We have sneaky ways of finding out who they are. Okay, you guys did good. You got it. You're getting it. All right. Are we ready to talk about APA? I would show you my APA book, which is literally right here behind my computer. I do not live without it. And you do want the 7th edition. If somebody tries to sell you the 6th edition, laugh in their face. It's not worth anything anymore, okay? You can recycle it for paper. We have citation tools, citing guides. If you remember on the homepage of the Public Administration Research Guide, it has APA citing, and I'm going to talk about those here in a minute. Well, there's also managing softwares. The university has EndNote, but we also have, there are free ones out there, Mendeley and Zotero. And that's why I looked to see when the next Zotero workshop was. I think he covered them. Well, he probably hasn't done them yet. That's why. He does them in the fall, I think. So if you watch for workshops, you might find, so you can gather data up and then put it in there, and it will do all the work for you for citing purposes. What you need in APA, you need the author's last name, first initial, middle initial, and all the other authors, last name, first initial, middle initial. APA allows up to 30 authors. I've never seen anything in your discipline with 30 authors, but if you're in the health sciences, that's actually not uncommon. It has to have a year in parentheses. It has to have the title of the article. Now that's upper and lower case, and that becomes important when you're editing your citations. It has to have the name of the periodical, that's both upper and lower case, and it's italicized, as well as the volume number is. Most journals have also issue numbers, but not always, but you need to include it if there is one. You have to put the page numbers, first page of article dash last page of article. That's something you also need to edit. ABI Inform, which has been around since the 60s, it's not uncommon for it to say page 75, article 15 pages long. Well, you're either going to have to do the math or look at the last page of the article and put it in there. Then if it's a scholarly article, you have to include the DOI. And it looks that way. Yes, you have to include the https://doi.org/ and whatever that alphanumeric thing is. And I'm going to show an example here in a minute. If you have a book, if you take a chapter out, say that Sage Handbook of Public Administration, the author of that chapter or authors, copyright year, the title of the book chapter, in the editor's thing, and that's where B. Guy Peters comes into play. Then you put it in the title of the book, then the edition, then you put PP in all the pages of that chapter, You put the publisher's name. You no longer have to figure out the city of that publisher. Hallelujah. Because in my bibliography, I've got some publishers that have changed cities as much as 25 times. Then if it's a scholarly chapter, you got to add the DOI or ULR. If not, there is none. If you have a report, your organizational name is your author, the year, the title of the report. And then if it's a government kind of thing, it's the agency in charge of the report is the next name in there. And then the linkage, the spot you found it on the web page link. Understanding that DOI, these are two examples that are out there. This is what it should look like. This is what it downloaded as. So I have to go back in before this 10, whoops, I'm sorry, and type in https://doi.org/ and then put the rest of that in. This one, sometimes the databases, the ProQuest products, sometimes the EBSCO products, they pick up our authenticator information, which doesn't do anybody any good. So even saying retrieve from, it doesn't happen. I need to say this, and you can say dx.do.org. I'm not going to type in 3 extra things, but I don't have to. So it can also be doi.org, and then the alphanumeric thing. Are there questions about what a DOI should look like? Because remember, I showed you how you can download the citations, which would include your DOI, and sometimes you do have to edit that field. Go ahead.
When you say edit the field, you mean adding the HTTPS and all of that in the
And
front?
take
Okay.
out that, sometimes that retrieve from with all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I showed you the correct version and the
Mhm.
version that comes up. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. The number that they give you is the number they're going to get. It's kind of like an Amazon tracking number. Okay. So this is out of Public Administration Abstracts. This is something that was published in 2001. I have it in paper and I have it online. So I got it and it told me I now have it online. And when I got there in 2001, this is a scholarly publication. That publisher went back and added DOIs to their whole history of all their journals back to volume 1, issue 1. So sometimes you need to actually go out and get the journal if it was pre-2017 published to actually see the DOI number, because the databases didn't go back and put them in, but the publishers added them to their site if they're publishing the journal. Okay, so I can cite it. It would include my DOI and all the information I need. So this is what the citation should really look like. Author's last name, first initial, middle initial, year. Now I had to edit this because it came through as capital F, capital G, capital E. Australian should be capitalized. It's a proper name, but it should be lowercase e, s, d, t, i. There's the name of the journal, volume, issue, pages, and DOI from a 2001 article. Okay. The more current stuff has the DOIs in them, and they'll come up when you download the citation. So get your little chat out. Look at these. From public, I downloaded these. From Public Administration Abstracts, what's wrong with no? No, that's their last name. What would I have to edit? I'm going to play the theme song from Jeopardy. Do, 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 do. No, actually, the DOI is correct. Oh, DOI.org. You're right. It's a hyphen. It should be a dot. Boy, you caught another one on me. I didn't even see that. All this time, I haven't even seen that. You're correct. It should be DOI.org. That's a good one. But there's another thing, a big, big, big thing. What about strategies? Induce, resistance, states, participate. ACA, health exchanges. No caps. Now, it isn't all changing because ACA, the American Health Exchanges, is actually a proper name. That still says capital. But the other words need to be moved to lowercase. From ABI, you will find more things wrong. And those question marks are apostrophes. I'll tell you that right now. I will accept that. But what do you think needs to be changed in this one? Do I have to give you a clue? I will give you a clue. Yes, the DOI. You do not say retrieve from and all that stuff. Because this is a name of a publication, it's online, I would put a period instead of that comma and finish it off there. It is not a scholarly publication. That does not look like a DOI number, does it? It looks like an account number. So it's not a scholarly publication. Employee benefits, it's a trade publication. So it doesn't even have a DOI. And all that needs to end after the end parentheses online period and leave it there. What about the last one from politics database? No caps, you got it. All should be capital, but the LL shouldn't. There is nothing else on all the rest of that title that should be capitalized at all. Again, no DOI because it's not a scholarly publication. This is a trade publication from the American Planning Association. You're kind of getting it. And I want you to see actual examples to see some of the things you need to think about. Okay. Are you ready to test to see if you really understand what you just saw? Make it work. I'm going to put you in escape rooms and you're going to have to escape out and see if you can answer the questions. Ooh, how mean can she be? Yes, yes. So in the chat, let me find it in my paperwork here. I'm giving you a Google form. And I will broadcast it again once you go to your room because it doesn't actually stay. But if you want to bring that up, there are 6 choices. I'll break you up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Groups of 6 are a little much. So I'm going to do 3 groups, okay? And then you guys can pick based on room 1. I would pick one of the top 2, room 2, the middle, 3, the end, okay? Pick your topic. I don't care. My thing is you're going to work together. You cannot share a screen, but you can talk together about seeing how you can make this process work. I've given you a topic. I want you to work all the way through the process to see if you can get some article at the end that kind of works. So I'm going to put you in breakout rooms and I'm going to do 3. You should be able to join. And I'll make sure I send, once we broadcast the Welcome back, guys. You're coming back. I see that.
Do you have access to our recorded answers? What was submitted?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, everybody's back, I believe. Sorry, I was checking my email. I'm kind of like you guys. Whole bunch came in while I was teaching. Is there anything you guys felt like you need to go over again? Because now that you've done it, it doesn't quite, it's confusing in your mind. Don't be shy.
I actually think it was more helpful to do it ourselves and kind of stumble through it as opposed to getting it just from you. So it was helpful.
That's why I do that. And that's why I put big groups together so you can, you know, one person picked up one thing that I said, another person picked up another thing I said, and between the group, you kind of get there. I was looking at the parks people because two of you took up parks. And it's interesting. I don't know if I still have the answers from last night. I don't know if you guys know this, but you kind of all picked the same article. I find that interesting. So that must be the article. I'll tell you that. It's good to know. The water one, where'd water go? Water was first. I want to make sure when I see the words that were used, let me go over that one more time because I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, You guys, when you type your words in, you don't put commas between them. You literally put the word in and another word or whatever. I want to make sure that commas are not used in the databases because it doesn't always work the way it should. It'd be better just to type in the words and let it, by default, it puts and between them, which is probably what you mean for the most part. You want that word and that word and that word. That makes sense. This is basic Boolean logic here. If you want something different, you would have to say green spaces, not playgrounds. Okay. Or you want to do green spaces or parks, or would be the word to get all the synonyms. I want to make sure you understand that, those concepts of and or not. Any other questions? Got a comment here. Okay. Yep, you guys all got it. Let me show you one last slide before I take off into the sunset to talk about help. Okay. On that first page of that LibGuide, on the start page, home page, if you go to the left-hand column at the bottom, there's a picture of me. And there's links to my email, links to make an appointment with me. We can do the Zoom meeting if needed when you get research. But I'm not the only ones that are out there. And I want to make sure you guys saw the chat. Let me share here. Do I have anything left here on my screens? Let's see if that's the one I want. When you're in the databases, the Ask a Librarian will pop up. Or if you're under Get Sources, the Ask a Librarian will pop up. I think it's even over here on the, well, that's FAQs. We have a service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that there is some librarian in the world on duty. There's my picture on my email and whatever, okay? This first page, I don't think I covered it. It has FAQs for access. If you're having problems with your computer, here's the chat with the librarian anytime. If it's a normal time, Sunday through Friday, that the librarians are on duty, you will talk to a Long Beach State librarian. Next default is CSU librarians, and after that, it's the world. And we know statistically that you guys do most of your research between the hours of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. So of course it's not us, but there will be a librarian, probably Australia, maybe India, whatever. Information finding works the same way worldwide, but if it doesn't, they cannot help you. They will create a ticket, and the next business day, we will pick that ticket up and contact you and make sure you get what you need. Quite often, if you have a question, if you email it to me and give me things like the words you used, the database you went in, I can email you back with screenshots and have the information. It's only when you have an intense research project that I'd probably want to sit down with you, either through Zoom or face-to-face at the library and do work. But the reality is most of the questions you can, with a few guidances, you can handle yourself. And that's why we hire librarians, because we get this. And you aren't supposed to get it. That's why you don't make the big bucks like we do. Go ahead. Question.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very quickly, do the library have any kind of tutorials or guidance on how to actually break down these documents and cite them? Because that's a separate thing to do, right? One thing is finding them. The other one is actually how to read, not how to read them, but how to really quote them and synthesize the work so you could cite them. Do you guys have any, workshops or anything like that to help us?
I know that one of our librarians has a little tutorial, an online tutorial, and I will try to find it and put on the public policy LibGuide on that start page, okay? Article breakdown is what you're talking about, how to read an article.
Yeah,
and used to be some good things out there, but yeah, they got old. But let me see. I think there's a librarian that has something. I think he's either doing it for psychology, or maybe there's the librarian for sociology that does that. So let me see what I can find, okay? Anything else you might need? Okay, Dr. Paul, Dave, I'm done with them.
Okay.
I've made their minds all mushy.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here.
You're welcome.
Spending this time. I know you're very busy, but it's very helpful. And I'm sure that, again, if you have questions, Kelly is available. Also, the session's recorded, so you can always go back and watch this session a little bit later on if you need to. But thank you again, Kelly. I truly appreciate it.
You are welcome. I hope I just see you guys.
Let's go ahead then and take a really brief break, just so you can move away from your computers if you need to. So we'll take a break until about 6:10. Then come on back at 6:10 and we will talk about American government and get the foundational information for the course started off. So come on back at 6:10 and we'll start with American government. Thanks again, Kelly. Okay, everyone, welcome back. I know that was a short break tonight, but we do have some information that we need to cover to kind of keep us on schedule. And so I thought it would be important to get back as soon as possible. Hopefully the information from Kelly was useful to you. Again, that's information you're going to use throughout the program. We don't really do research papers in this class because it is an introductory course. But as you move through the program, you will get experience doing annotated bibliographies. You'll get experience doing literature reviews. And so you'll have a lot of opportunities in courses like organization theory and research methods and policy analysis to really hone your skills at doing research and writing annotated bibliographies and literature reviews. I do want to say thank you for everyone who submitted your introduction post. I've gone through and read all those, and also for everyone who had the opportunity to do the American Government Pre-Assessment. Again, ungraded, it's anonymous. It was just for my purposes to kind of give me a little bit of guidance in terms of what information we need to cover tonight and next week in terms of the foundations of American government. So thank you for that. You do have your first two graded assignments that are coming due for next week. You have your Canvas essay number 1, which looks at Federalist Paper number 10, and we will talk about Federalist Paper number 10 tonight, where you look at the argument that Madison makes about factions in Federalist number 10, and then answering the question of if you think we are more factionalized as a country today than we were back when Madison wrote Federalist Paper number 10. You're going to be giving me an initial response to that prompt, and then you're going to be responding to 2 of your classmates. And so you'll be doing that with your Canvas essay, which in all 3 of those posts then are due no later than midnight on February 7th. And then you also have your initial skills self-assessment that is due on February 8th. I've already received several of those and responded to those. Again, no right or wrong answers on that either. That's a credit, no credit type of assignment. So just give an honest assessment of your skills and experience in those core programmatic areas. So Canvas essay, those 3 responses due by February 7th, and then the initial skills self-assessment due by February the 8th. How I would like to spend the rest of our time tonight, and admittedly we don't have a whole lot of time left, but to get started with our discussion of the foundational aspects of American government. And again, we have folks coming into the program from a variety of different educational backgrounds. For some people, you may have taken American government recently in your undergraduate career. For others, it may be 20 or 30 years since you've had American government. For others, you may not have ever taken an American government class at the undergraduate level. But it's important for us to understand the role that public administration, the public sector play within our system of American government. So for many people, this discussion tonight will be very much of a refresher. For others, some of this information may not be nearly as fresh. But we know our system of American government is really predicated on this whole idea of limitation of power. In our system of government, we limit the power of government in a variety of different ways. One way we limit the power of government is through a horizontal limitation through our system that you're familiar with of separation of powers, checks and balances. We have a legislative branch, we have an executive branch, and we have a judicial branch. So we separate power horizontally between those 3 different branches of government. Next week, when we get into our discussion of the Constitution, we will talk about what the Constitution says about the legislature, about Congress in Article 1, about the president and the executive branch in Article 2, and then what it says about the Supreme Court in Article 3. But that's a horizontal separation of powers. But then we also separate power vertically through our system of American federalism. So with American federalism, what we do is we divide the powers and responsibilities between a national government and state governments. In our constitutional system of federalism, there are not provisions in the US Constitution for local governments. So local governments enjoy no protection under the original US Constitution. We are only separating power vertically between a national government and state governments. But in limiting power, we can do it horizontally through separation of powers, but we can also do it vertically in our system of American federalism. As we all know as Americans, our system of government is predicated on being both a democracy as well as a republic. So when we talk about a democracy, what makes a government a democracy? So when we say something's a democracy, how do we know a government is a democracy? How do we know our system of government is a democracy? What do we mean by democracy? You can use your microphone, you can use text chat, whatever you're comfortable with, but what's a democracy?
Officials elected through the public.
Yeah, we certainly participate as citizens in selecting our representatives. We participate in that aspect of decision making. In a democracy, power resides with the people, and the people participate directly in their own governance. So in a direct democracy, people would make decisions about policies and issues at the ballot box. So in California and many Western states, we have multiple vehicles that we can use for direct democracy. Here in California, we have what we call a referendum process. And with a referendum, the state legislature will decide to put an issue on the ballot. So the state legislature may say, well, we're considering issuing debt. We're considering borrowing money as a state to build certain types of facilities, perhaps to upgrade our state parks. So the state legislature says, we're going to let the voters decide whether or not they want us to borrow money to upgrade our state parks. So they put the issue on the ballot for the upcoming election. That's what's known as a referendum, because it's the state legislature that decides to put the issue on the ballot. Then voters can go to the ballot box and they can then decide whether or not they want the state to issue debt. That's a referendum. Then we also have a vehicle known as the initiative process. With the initiative process here in California, individual citizens can get together a petition, and if they get the required number of signatures on that petition, they can then force an issue onto the ballot that people can vote on at the ensuing election. Usually when you have an initiative process, there's a certain minimum required number of signatures. Very commonly, you have to get enough signatures to be equal to 8% of the people who voted in the last gubernatorial election. So if you get a number of signatures equal to 8% of the people who voted in the last gubernatorial election, then you can force an issue onto the ballot. So they will circulate petitions. Those petitions, they get enough signatures. They then send them to the Secretary of State's office. The Secretary of State will review those signatures to make sure that they are valid signatures, that they're signatures of registered voters. And if they have enough valid signatures, then the Secretary of State will put that issue on the ballot. An example of that somewhat recently was the recall election, the recall initiative for Governor Newsom. And so there were enough signatures to force that recall issue onto the ballot, and then Californians could vote on recalling the governor. They voted against recalling the governor, but that's an example of an initiative process. So through a referendum or through an initiative, we have the opportunities as citizens to actually engage in our own self-governance and to actually make these types of policy decisions. But we're not only a democracy, we're also a Republican form of government, small r Republican form of government. And being a republic means that we select people to make decisions for us. So we select people to represent us in the House and in the US Senate and in the California Assembly, in the California State Senate, in the City Council of Long Beach, and our local school boards. We select people to represent us to then go and make these decisions for us in legislative bodies. That's a Republican form of government. So we have both vestiges of a democracy as well as a republic in our system of government. The reason why we have these vestiges of a democracy and a Republican form of government is because our whole system is predicated on the notion that power comes from the people. And it's really predicated on this whole idea of social contract theory. And if you did have undergraduate political science, you probably remember people like Thomas Hobbes and John Locke and these other political philosophers in the 1600s. Social contract theory comes directly from John Locke. And in social contract theory, Locke argues that power comes from the people And so the people then enter into a contract with their government, whereby people give up certain rights and certain liberties to government to provide government with the power and the resources to then look after the welfare of the public. So it's a contract whereby we give up certain rights and liberties to government. Government then agrees to use those rights and liberties, not to abuse them, but to use them judiciously in order to make decisions in the best interest of the welfare of the public. That social contract obviously is our Constitution. So the written contract is the Constitution. John Locke was a huge influence on a lot of the framers of the Constitution, most notably Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson borrowed liberally from a lot of the writings of John Locke, so much so that we won't say there is plagiarism, but if Turnitin existed back in the 1700s, I think Thomas Jefferson would probably get a pretty high similarity score in his writings as compared to John Locke's. So Thomas Jefferson wrote about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. John Locke wrote about life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. There's a whole lot of overlap between social contract theory and our framers of our Constitution. But social contract theory is important for us because, again, that written contract is the Constitution. And we, as public administrators, need to know the Constitution. We need to know the constitutional rights of those individuals we are dealing with. And then we need to endeavor not to violate those constitutional rights. You may have heard a lot of talk recently about this thing known as qualified good faith immunity. Qualified good faith immunity says that administrators, those working in government, if they are acting within the confines of their position and they're acting in good faith of their position, then they have some immunity from being sued and from being held liable for their actions. That's a big change from what used to be called sovereign immunity. Under sovereign immunity, if someone was working for a government, they were completely immune from being sued because they are working for a government, a sovereign entity. Public administrators no longer have sovereign immunity. They have qualified good faith immunity, which means that we have a heightened responsibility for knowing and understanding the constitutional rights of those that we come into contact with. That's why it's so important in this class for us to lay a very firm foundation of what the Constitution says and how the Constitution influences what we do as public administrators. So the first contract that we had as a country, our first Constitution, was the Articles of Confederation. And I provided a link to the articles so you had an opportunity to read through the articles before a class tonight. We're not going to go through the articles like we'll go through the Constitution next week, but just to highlight some of the flaws in the articles that led to the Constitution we currently have today. So in the articles created what was called a firm league of friendship between the states. It was very much a confederation, whereby every state retained its own sovereignty and autonomy and just agreed to work together in this league of friendship. To underscore that, the words United States of America that we are so familiar with today as a proper noun, capitalized, United States of America. That phrase, capitalized as a proper noun, was used only one time in the Articles of Confederation. And that's where at the beginning of the articles say the style of this confederation shall be the United States of America. By style, they mean essentially the name. So they're saying the name of this confederation will be called United States of America. Throughout the articles, though, whenever United States is referred to, we usually see it referred to as the United States in Congress assembled. That's a huge point. That when we say United States in Congress assembled, what we are saying in the articles is that we are united as states when the states are assembled together in this Congress or this meeting. So the word Congress under the articles was used to represent a meeting. We today, when we think about Congress, we capitalize the word Congress and we think about the House of Representatives and the US Senate. For us today, it is a permanent brick and mortar enduring institution. Under the Articles, Congress just simply meant a meeting of the states. So the United States was a thing. I mean, it was a proper noun when you had the states meeting together in this Congress, in this meeting. And the reason for that is that the states had the ability to remove their delegates at any time. So the states get together into this meeting, this Congress. If a state didn't like what was going on within this meeting, the state could then pick its marbles up and go home. It could just recall its delegates, go home, and stop playing ball with the rest of the states. That is very much a confederation. Each state retains its own individual sovereignty. Individual states had very little ability to coin money and to basically have anything unifying to pull them together as a state. You didn't have a situation where you had a strong national government. We didn't have a standing army. We had state militias, and so our defense was being provided for by state militias rather than a unified national standing army. And we had a triggering event that happened after the adoption of the Articles of Confederation that led a lot of people to think we need to do something to change those articles. And what happened was, if you remember to your history classes, this triggered event known as Shays' Rebellion. And Shays' Rebellion was a rebellion of farmers that was led by an army captain, a retired army captain by the name of Daniel Shays. So Daniel Shays, this retired army captain, led these farmers in a revolt, in a rebellion. Farmers were upset because they were losing their farms. They were being foreclosed upon on their farms. They felt they didn't have any rights to land ownership, and they were rebelling against essentially the mercantile and the middle to upper class. Well, the state militia in Massachusetts finally was able to put down this insurrection, but it took them days to do so, and it was a very difficult process. That was an eye-opening experience for a lot of people who looked at it and said, if the state militia is having so much trouble putting down this rebellion of a retired army captain and a bunch of farmers, what the heck are we going to do if we end up being invaded by a foreign nation like France, or if England comes back and invades us? So clearly, we need more defense from the national government. The national government, there really wasn't much of a national government under the Articles. The president was more or less a figurehead position. The president came from the Congress. The Congress didn't have any power to regulate the states in terms of commerce. The states were engaging in their own interstate commerce. We needed a much stronger national government. So we ended up with the Constitutional Convention. The purpose of the Constitutional Convention was not to replace the Articles, but rather just to amend the Articles. But one of the flaws in the Articles is that if you wanted to amend the Articles of Confederation, you needed to get unanimous agreement of all 13 states. That's the only way you could amend the Articles. We can imagine how difficult it would be to get unanimous agreement of all 13 states to amend the Constitution. It's difficult enough to get everyone to unanimously agree about where to go for lunch, let alone amending the Constitution. So it was difficult to get this type of an amendment to the Constitution. So we had to get together in a convention in order to do these amendments. Well, the way in which the Constitutional Convention started was that, you think back to when the Constitutional Convention occurred, the late 1700s, you didn't have paved roads, you didn't have mass transportation. People were, riding their horses and taking their carts and riding through mud, sometimes mud, knee-deep mud, to try and get to the Constitutional Convention. The problem with that was some folks arrived at the convention before others. One person who arrived at the convention very early was James Madison. And James Madison was the leader of a faction in the Constitutional Convention known as the Federalists. The Federalists wanted a much stronger national government, and the Federalists believed that the Articles of Confederation were fatally flawed, and that it wasn't enough to amend the Articles. We needed to get rid of the Articles altogether and replaced them with a new constitution that created a much stronger, much more vibrant national government. So since Madison and the Federalists arrived to the Constitutional Convention first, they were able to really get the ball rolling toward throwing out the articles and replacing them with a brand new constitution. By the time the anti-federalists rolled into town and got to the Constitutional Convention, led by people like Sherman, the impetus had already been started to replace the articles with a new constitution. When the anti-federalists got to town and got to this Constitutional Convention, they were willing to admit that they wanted a national government to provide more in the way of defense. And they agreed we needed more national defense from this national government. Madison's job was to get the anti-federalists to admit they wanted more out of the new national government than just strengthen defense. And if you think about the delegates who were at that Constitutional Convention, in order to be a delegate to the convention, you had to fit certain characteristics. Number one, you had to be white. Number two, you had to be male. Number three, you had to be a property owner. These individuals who were delegates at the Constitutional Convention, they were the creditors. They were the people who loaned the money to make the Revolutionary War possible. They needed to get their debts repaid, and they wanted to get their money back. So Madison was able to press that nerve with those anti-federalists and say, you're the creditors, you want to get your money back. The national government, as it was created under the Articles of Confederation, is insufficient to help you get your debts repaid. You need a much stronger national government, one that can get involved in things such as coining money, such as regulating commerce between the states. You need that economic component with the national government. And once Madison was able to get the anti-federalists to agree that they wanted more out of the national government than just merely defense, that they wanted to get their debts repaid, then it was game over. And then Madison could very easily get everyone to agree that we need to get rid of the articles and replace the articles with a brand new constitution. Now, at this Constitutional Convention, we had three main conflicts that were going on that needed to be resolved in order to get a constitution written and ratified. The first conflict was one I just mentioned between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists wanted a stronger national government that could regulate commerce in addition to providing for national defense. Anti-Federalists believed in states' rights. They believed that states were sovereign entities, and they feared this new national government would exert too much influence over the states and take away some of the states' sovereignty. Now, you remember the frame of reference that the framers had to deal with when they were creating this Constitution is, on one side, they were just recently removed from England. They were recently removed from being under the yoke of this monarchy and this very oppressive monarchy. But on the other side, they also saw Shays' Rebellion, and they saw some of the limitations of an Articles of Confederation, some limitations with having a true confederacy. So they had to kind of find that middle ground to agree upon. So you had the Federalists wanting a strong national government, the Anti-Federalists wanting states' rights and state sovereignty. Then the second main conflict that was going on in the Constitutional Convention was a conflict between large states and small states. Large states wanted proportional representation in Congress because that would give them more representation. So New York and Virginia and Pennsylvania, those large states wanted proportional representation. Smaller states want to have equal representation. Now, under the Articles of Confederation, it was a unicameral Congress. It was just a meeting of the states. We only had one, essentially, House of Congress. So the large states put forth what was called the Virginia Plan, which called for proportional representation in Congress. Small states put forth what was called the New Jersey Plan, which called for equal representation. The compromise we came to, the Great Compromise, was the Connecticut Compromise, whereby we create a two-house Congress, a House of Representatives and a Senate. The House of Representatives would be proportional representation, and the Senate would be equal representation to senators from each state. That great compromise, that Connecticut Compromise, was the way in which the framers dealt with this large state versus small state disagreement. Then the third main conflict that was going on at the Constitutional Convention was the disagreement between slave states and non-slave states. Slave states obviously had a vested interest in maintaining the slave trade and maintaining the institution of slavery. Non-slave states obviously did not. So the framers had to try and work out a compromise between slave states and non-slave states. Even though they did very well in coming with a compromise for the difference between large and small states, they did not do very well at all, obviously, with their compromises in terms of dealing with the problems between slave and non-slave states. The compromises they put in the Constitution to deal with the slavery issue were obviously abhorrent by today's standards, but the one compromise they came to was the 3/5 compromise, that in order to count for representation in Congress, you would count an enslaved population as 3/5 of a free population. Obviously, something that we find abhorrent today. That was the way in which they came to that compromise in the Constitution. Then the second compromise they came to in the Constitution was a prohibition against banning the slave trade until 1808. They essentially pushed the issue to a future generation. They punted the issue to a future generation. So those compromises that they came to agreement on in order to get the Constitution written and get the Constitution ratified laid the seeds then obviously for the Civil War, and really laid the seeds for a lot of the issues that we have been dealing with over the past 200 years. So they had to come to an agreement in terms of the slave versus non-slave issue, the large state versus small state issue, and the Federalist versus anti-Federalist issue. Now, the way in which they came to an agreement with the compromises to deal with the Federalist, anti-Federalist issue is that they have a series of compromises in the Constitution that kind of are contrary to each other and come into conflict with each other. So as we look through the Constitution next week, we'll see things such as the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution that says that the Constitution and laws and treaties of the United States are the supreme laws of the land, meaning that when a national law or constitution comes into conflict with a state law or constitution, the national law or constitution wins. That's a very strong pronouncement of national government power. But on the flip side of the coin, we then have the 10th Amendment that was added to the Constitution, the Reserve Powers Amendment that says that all powers are now explicitly given to Congress nor denied to the states belong to the states and or the people. So again, two conflicting passages. We also will see next week in Article 1, Section 8, the framers enumerated certain powers of Congress. They listed certain specific powers of Congress, but at the end of Article 1, Section 8, they provide Congress with an elastic clause where they say Congress shall make all laws necessary and proper for carrying to execution all the enumerated powers listed in Article 1, Section 8. So on one side of the coin, the Constitution gives a lot of power to the national government, but on the other side of the coin, it tries to reserve a lot of power to states as well. In order to get the Constitution ratified, the framers had to do two main things. One thing they had to do is they had to immediately amend the Constitution 10 times in the Bill of Rights. So we get 10 initial amendments to the Constitution. And those amendments to the Constitution, those first 10 amendments to the Bill of Rights, were designed to reassure, particularly the citizens of New York who had not yet ratified the Constitution, that this Constitution did not create too strong of a national government and would not steal rights from individual citizens. So as soon as we write the Constitution, we immediately amend it 10 times with the Bill of Rights. And that's one thing that they did in order to try and get ratification. The problem was when the Constitution was adopted at the Constitutional Convention, Article 7 of the Constitution says that the Constitution goes into effect whenever it is ratified by 9 out of 13 states. You didn't have to have unanimous ratification, you had to have 9 out of 13 states for the Constitution to go into legal effect. The problem is you got 10 states relatively quickly. Within 2 years, you had 10 of the 13 states ratifying the Constitution. The problem was that you had one state one very large, very important state that was a holdout, and that was the state of New York. The framers understood that if they did not have New York on board, they had nothing, because New York really was the linchpin of commerce between the colonies. And if New York was not buying into this new constitution and this new union, then the Constitution would almost become meaningless. They had to get New York to ratify the Constitution. So the Bill of Rights hopefully would help convince the citizens of New York that they should ratify this new Constitution. But the second thing that they did is three of the framers, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, those three framers got together and wrote the Federalist Papers. So between the three of them, they wrote 85 Federalist Papers. Jay only wrote 3 because he fell ill and wasn't able to write anymore. I believe Madison wrote 27, if I'm not mistaken, and the remaining number of Federalist Papers, I guess 55 or so, were written by Alexander Hamilton. The goal of the Federalist Papers was to basically sell this new Constitution, this new national government, to the citizens of New York to get them on board with ratifying the Constitution. Now, I've provided a link for you in our Canvas site for you. If you want to read all of the Federalist Papers, you're certainly encouraged to do that if you have the time. But for this class, we are pulling out certain Federalist Papers to focus on. And the two ones that we're really going to focus on are Federalist Paper number 10 and Federalist Paper number 39. We'll talk more about Federalist Paper 39 next week when we talk about the Constitution specifically. But to get you ready for your first graded Canvas essay, let's spend a minute or two talking about Federalist number 10. So in Federalist number 10, Madison writes to try and convince people that, again, the Constitution is something that should be ratified and that the new government, the new Constitution, will not create chaos. Up until this point in time, the prevailing political wisdom was the most effective and efficient form of government was what was referred to as a compact republic. So Montesquieu and other philosophers said, we needed to have a compact republic. We needed to have a small, homogeneous jurisdiction in order to make government work. That for these compact republic adherents, they would argue that if it was too large of a country with too many different opinions and perspectives, you would never be able to get agreement. Madison countered this idea of a compact republic with his idea of a compound republic, which was really very revolutionary, no pun intended, at the time. In a compound republic, Madison argues that we don't need a small jurisdiction with homogeneity of opinion. We need a large jurisdiction with different heterogeneous opinions. That whenever we have a democracy like we are proposing in this new government, we are going to have conflict. Democracy breeds conflict. That's a given with a democracy. Because in this democracy, we are basically putting together what we call a pluralist system. In a system of pluralism, everyone has the opportunity to participate. So if an issue is important enough to you, you have avenues for participation in a pluralistic society, in a compound republic. Since everyone has an opportunity to participate, we're going to have different groups that emerge that have different policy goals and different policy aims. These different groups he referred to as factions. Now, today, a faction can certainly be a political party, a faction could be an interest group, but a faction is essentially a group of individuals who all share a similar interest, which may be different than another faction's interests. And so when you have two or more factions that have different goals, they're going to come into conflict with each other. He said that's inevitable in a democracy. So in Federalist Paper number 10, he said there are two ways to deal with factions. One is to eliminate them. He said that's problematic because if you eliminate factions, you're eliminating liberty, you're eliminating a democracy. So if you want to have a democracy, you're always going to have factions. So the elimination of factions is not practical. The more practical option, according to Madison, is you control their effects. So instead of eliminating them, you control the effects of factions. And how you do that is by balancing faction against faction. As Hamilton talked about in Federalist Paper number 28, you balance ambition against ambition. So by balancing faction against faction, we can control the effects of those factions and keep those factions in check. For your Canvas essay for this week, you're going to read Federalist Paper number 10 by James Madison, and then talk about how factionalized you believe we are today compared to how we were back when Madison wrote Federalist number 10. And then what can be done to help control the effects of factions and to balance one faction against another. So that's your topic for the Canvas essay. I want to make sure, even though I know we're completely out of time tonight, make sure we mention Federalist number 10, because that's what you're going to be writing your discussion board post, your Canvas essay on. Again, you're going to be responding to that prompt on Federalist number 10 with an initial response, anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 paragraphs, and then you'll need to respond to 2 of your classmates as well. So be sure to have your initial response as well as your responses to 2 classmates. Have those 3 posts done and posted into our discussion area, our Canvas essay area, no later than midnight on February 7th. We're completely out of time, so we're going to have to stop there for tonight. But we're going to pick up with this next week at the beginning of the class, and we will talk about the idea of power and limiting power, what power is. We'll talk about why it's important to understand all these principles of American government as public administrators. We'll turn our attention to the Constitution. We'll go through the 7 articles and 27 amendments in the Constitution. Then, with whatever time is remaining next week, we'll then wrap up our discussion of American government and then move into a discussion of accountability and ethics. So I'm sorry I took you over by a minute tonight. I apologize for that, especially if you have a 7 o'clock class. But we'll have to stop it there tonight and pick up our discussion of American government then next week. Any real quick questions before we get out of here tonight? Luciano, go ahead.
Hey, Professor, really quick, as for the response, I remember you mentioning just do our best, because I think we could get lost in being very opinionated with your opinions, right? Personal opinions. Any advice on how to, go about these responses?
Yeah, I think and you're right. I mean, we want to take kind of the science approach of political science here, and that we don't want to be really opinion-based. We want to be as scientific and objective as possible. So I think, don't think about it from perhaps the position you hold or a faction you may feel you belong to, but rather from a more macro level. Look at what does it mean to have these factions in terms of governance and getting things done on a daily basis, and how can we get things done better dealing with all these factions. So try and be as objective and kind of take that macro level focus and kind of, take the individual out of it. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, I'll let you go now. Again, I got this recording, so I will have the recording then up on our website by tomorrow. So thank you very much, everyone, and I will talk to you again then next Wednesday. So thanks, and have a great remainder of the week.
Professor, the assessment, is it the initial skills self-assessment that we are supposed to do?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's, and again, it's just, it's a 3-part assessment. The first part is just ordinal rankings across those different areas. The second part is just a sentence or 2 of your experience in those 5 core areas of budgeting, HR, org theory, policy, and research methods. And then the third part is just what you hope to get out of the program. If you're not in the MPA program, then just answer what you'd like to get out of this class.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Sure, my pleasure. Take care.
You too. Bye.